We're almost out of time here. Time flies when you're shooting the breeze and talking about the future of gaming here. This is almost a selfish question, but I believe it's one that's of interest to many people in the audience. So we have three esteemed, successful CEOs up here, and I happen to be an educator of the future leaders of the industry over at the university in Maryland Parkway, about a mile away from here. If you were giving advice to a kid who wanted to be in your shoes, or a colleague out here in the audience who wants to be a CEO one day, what's the best piece of leadership advice or best leadership book or management book that's driven you as you all have thought about developing a leadership strategy? What advice would you have to those who aspire to be Greg's, Gavin's, and Mark's someday?
Well, I'm not sure I'd advise him to take my path, which was spend a lot of time in Atlantic City during my undergraduate years. So, that's where I did pick up a love for the business, and I did go down to Atlantic City more than an undergraduate should probably go. But it was great, great experience and research. As far as advice, I love reading books about gaming. I love reading books about the history of Las Vegas. I mean, it's a very interesting history. I read the book about Jay Sarno, the Grandees.
David Schwartz's book.
It's great. David Schwartz's book. That's a great book. And Roger Wagner wrote a great book about his career, starting out in working out in hotels at the front desk, and all the way up to running properties. So, and there's a lot of really interesting books and material out there to read if you're excited about the industry and want to be in the industry.
I was just going to say that I've got two authors of books and I've read several of their books that I find very relevant to young people and learning about how to be a CEO or how to do business in general. And one of them has to do with Jack Welch, straight from the gut. I had the opportunity when I was at Hertz to work with him directly about every 5 months. He was with the private equity firm, Clayton, Duplain Rice, and he was the lead partner there who, I got to review strategy with constantly. And I used to work for 10 years at General Electric as well when he was CEO. So I have a lot of experience there. And one thing that he teaches you in one of his books, and he says it repeatedly, is that you never spend enough time developing people. And that people and EQ and understanding that aspect of leadership is probably the most important thing in today's environment with millennials and others. You need to understand that having the right person for the right job and then developing that person into what you want them to be next, that's more critical than a lot of the other things, that you should be spending 25 to 30% of your time doing that. So I don't think people in management today spend 25 to 30% of their time actually developing people, but it's a good lesson, and he speaks volumes about it. So that one, straight from the gut, he's written like 4 books, and it talks a lot about that. The second one is Gary Hamel. He's a futurist, and he's written Competing for the Future. He's the architect of what's called the strategic one-page architecture for the organization. And he's a very inspiring writer in terms of looking at how industries have been changed or eliminated because people have ignored trends. It's a great case study in his books, and you can see that, for example, Kodak. Who would have ever thought Kodak would be gone, right? I mean, think about it. Look at all the companies that are out of business because the internet came, right? Do we have copy machines anymore? Do we really fax things anymore? I mean, there's whole industries that have been transformed, and a lot of those companies didn't survive. And he gives you a list of about 500, and since 1960 to right now, currently, if you look at the Fortune 100 companies in 1960, did you know there's only 2 alive today? Fortune 100. Isn't that stunning? So I think it's a great lesson for leaders to think about innovation, to think about always thinking what's next and trying to invest in that.
Very cool. Now, Gavin, to bring this full circle, the content of that lecture that you, after an exhausted 3 weeks on the road, delivered to our future leaders of the gaming industry had nothing to do with the lecture you had been giving to investors all over the place, which had to do with the very specific products and the ways in which the investment mechanisms could inform this process. It was 10 things I've learned, and I'll never forget. It was one of the coolest lectures I've ever been privileged to sit through, and our 50 students there were very, very lucky to get to be there. But it had nothing to do with all the stuff that you talk about day to day. It had a ton of good nuggets in there. So I'm interested in hearing your take here as somebody who I know people love to work for you. Talk a little bit about your leadership style and where it comes from and what you would advise the next generation.
Yeah, I think that those 10 fundamental guidelines, if you want to call it that, are things I've picked up over time from reading from history, reading about gaming, reading about adventure, anything. I read lots of things. I like biographies, and not so much on the business books. There's a few of them, like the Jack Welch's of the world, and different people like that. But, you know, I love reading about history and all of that. And I tell everyone, you know, there's some certain things you've just got to do if you want to get on with it and you really want to succeed. The most important thing is you've got to be passionate about it. If you don't have the passion, it's really hard to give it 110%. You've always got to hold yourself accountable. You should never tell a lie. And all those different addicts, and then ultimately you've got to have fun. I think if you're passionate and you win, you're going to have a lot more fun. And that's sort of how we wrap it up. You know, Mark said you spend about 25% of your time or whatever on people and development. I think as CEOs we spend a lot more than that probably. And I think people are our most important asset. So to encourage people to talk to people, to listen to people, it's very important to listen. You put that all together and you create an environment which is consistent with those core values. And ideally, if everyone's pulling in the same direction, you're more than likely going to be successful. That's the cultures that I like to work in, so that's the culture I like to create.
Very cool, very cool. We're at the end of our time, but if I can make a pitch for the program that Gavin came and lectured at, our executive development program, which was founded by the great Bill Eadington, the founding father. Me back. If I could sell my own product. Bill Eadington was an academic who came up with this crazy idea in 1969 that you could study gaming from an academic, scientific perspective, and he almost got kicked out of the economics department for coming up with such a ludicrous idea. And soon after that, he founded an executive development program. It's up in the mountains of Lake Tahoe. This is our 25th birthday. Once again, you can hear, if you have a future star, you can hear lectures like this and just brilliant, brilliant presentations from the best in the business. And our 25th birthday will be today at 3 p.m. over in the Southern Wine and Spirits Lounge, as we'll be celebrating many, many years of successful education. And we also will be awarding an alumnus of the quarter century. So it'll be quite an intense moment. It's not you, Gavin. Awkward here to reveal that it wasn't. But again, all of you have been just tremendously, tremendously interesting thinkers. As a nerdy academic, I just really appreciate that, and I want to thank all of you for being here and all of you for listening. Thanks.